The Journey Through a Distant Land, Volume 2, The Expansion of Modern Science by Amalgamating Royal Science, by TZAFRIR, Y. BEGGARMEN, M.B. Reading 6, Continuation 2 for Article 2.2. The Noble Gases. Now, to end this compendium that is driven in this article, we will now speak on another group labeled the noble gases. Noble gases consist of the elements helium, neon, argon, krypton, xenon, and radon. We will take one of these noble gases called helium to explain how this element functions on both ends of the spectrum, just like the other groups from the modern science and royal science point of view. Helium is a colorless, odorless, insipid gas. Helium has an atomic number of 2 and goes by the symbol He. When helium is inhaled, it produces a high voice, dizziness, dullness, and from contact on the skin in its liquid form can cause frostbite. This element is also less soluble in water than any other gas. Helium is a less reactive element and does not essentially form chemical compounds because of its unwillingness to give up electrons/sins. They are already stable. The density and viscosity of helium vapor are very low. The thermic conductivity and the caloric content are exceptionally high. Helium can be liquefied, but its condensation temperature is the lowest among all the known substances. Helium was the first gas used for filling balloons and aircrafts. This application goes on in altitude research and meteorological balloons. Helium holds electron/sins shell closest to the nucleus. It does not want to give up any electrons, the sins, or the evil proclivities and carnal pleasures. Thus, it takes a considerable amount of energy to remove an electron. There are elements that are known as reactive elements because these atoms really like to follow what is commonly called the buddy system and form bonds with other atoms. Not so with noble gases. Noble gases don't have this problem. In fact, their outer shells are filled to the max, so they don't need to bond or react with any other atoms. They are quite happy and don't need to react with other elements. They rarely combine with other elements. This non-reactivity is why they are called inert. Now, for the amalgamative deliberation. You must understand helium in its true form, crouching in the higher levels of existence in the upper heavens. It is perceived as the helium-rich man disposition. Royal Science Archives, March 17 and 25. As Joshua was starting out on his way to Jerusalem, a man came running up to him and knelt and asked, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "Why do you call me good?" Joshua asked. "Only Elohim is truly good. But to answer your question, you know the commandments. You must not murder. You must not commit adultery. You must not steal. You must not testify falsely. You must not cheat anyone. Honor your father and mother." "Teacher," the man replied, "I obeyed these commandments since I was young." Looking at the man, Joshua felt genuine love for him. "There is still one thing you haven't done," he told him. "Go and sell all your possessions and give the money to the poor, and you will have treasures in heaven. Then come and follow me." At this, the man's face fell, and he went away sad, for he had many possessions. Joshua looked around and said to his disciples, "How hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom of Elohim." This amazed them. But Joshua said again, "Dear children, it is very hard to enter the kingdom of Elohim. In fact, it is easier to put a camel through a head of a needle before a rich man enter into the kingdom of Elohim. In modern science, helium is a colorless, odorless, insipid gas. This fact is seen in royal science in the metaphysical meaning of color. These assorted colors are the appearance of truth, by which the spiritual of the natural is known and distinguished. Colors are the divine truths that the rich man or the person with this rich disposition does not possess, which makes him or her colorless. To ascertain these divine truths, one must clear the heart and dispose of all carnal and mundane connecting images by floxenacin and hilification of telluric thinking. Just knowing knowledge of spiritual things will never ever touch the ground. A person with this rich man helium disposition, or complexion if you will, as it is called by Jacob Boehm, could never enter the spiritual heavenly consciousness by traditions, ceremonies, rituals, or even human morality, until knowledge becomes understanding by experience and participation in the love principle of the divine light, arbitrated by the eternal dynasty of the royal fiat of excellent beauty. Only through sacrificing the carnality with its connecting earthly tokens and all the attractive satanic effigies on the cross of the mind can one rise from the fallen brutish state of thinking and reasoning to a more perfect angelical state of thinking and being in the upper/inward worlds of splendor. This is beautifully articulated in royal science in Matthew 6:21. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. This is a systematic divine axiom that cannot be mixed or altered by intellectual reasoning and justification that produce false characters and false personalities, tailored to the hope of procuring physical earthly riches and at the same time attempting to partake in spiritual feasting with real and for certain spiritual substantial appropriations of etheric and pneumatic winged tokens of delights. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Now listen to Luke 4:6. And the devil said unto him, All this power will I give thee, and the glory of them, for that is delivered unto me, and to whomsoever I will give it. The rich man bows to the devil in consciousness, in the mind, always selfishly accumulating and selfishly distributing money in order to receive riches. You, O man, will never have both worlds. For the temporal earthly riches and the glories are given to the power source of the carnal mind, who is Satan, while that which is heavenly is eternally reserved within the Father of lights. El Elyon, the holy, mighty, all-striking, mercifully bright, gloriously divine, unspeakable, holy, cornucopia of super supreme power for the chivalric delight of man. This carnal mind is at enmity towards Yahweh. Yahweh, the lover of man, wants the whole heart, which, by the way, he is well worthy of that, my friends. There is an unspeakable, unadulterated, universal law that produces a real inner knowledge of reason, contrast to the false, that is strong as a cedar tree, that will explain why you will not be able to mix the carnal tokens and possessions with spiritual appropriations and possessions. Behold, Matthew 6:24, no man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. Ye cannot serve Elohim and Mammon. We do not possess the power to change this with action of thought. This is a set universal law. So stop trying to develop excuses using false interpretations of scripture and use your skills in the right direction uprightly. You are fighting a divine majesty. You will sorely lose. In earthly modern science, it is known that helium is odorless. This is understood in royal science as spiritual odor. Spiritual odor is the sweet smell that emanates from one's soul through the fire of Yahweh, which generates a sweet fragrance of love and charity. That is produced from the fire in the word and made by fire, which is the glory of deity. To produce a sweet savor, one must use the sacrificial power given to man by Yahshua the Messiah, the abnegation produced from the will of a person. In the giving up of earthly tokens in juxtaposition to this, carnal pleasures in the midst of tribulation and trial, spiritual fire. Leviticus 3 and 5. Then Aaron's son shall offer it up in smoke on the altar, on the burnt offering, which is on the wood that is on the fire. It is an offering by fire of a soothing aroma to Yahweh. It is like a closing of the hands, a denial of that particular carnal self-satisfaction that produces and leads to pride, egotistical earthly glory, vanity, acting in such a way or procuring earthly things to cause another to feel envy or jealousy. Evil tokens are a cause that leads you to debauchery, deceit, superiority, lewdness, narcissism, larceny, and selfishness. These and many other shortcomings form a person into a cockalorum and an anemical bladderskite. This is the explanation for helium being odorless. A person with this rich man helium disposition has no spiritual odor, except for the foul smell of carnality, which is as the odor of dung to the Creator that reaches into the heavens to the presence of Yahweh. Genesis 19 and 13. For we will destroy the city completely. The stench of the place has reached Yahweh, and he has sent us to destroy it. Warning, do not produce a foul smell. The physical element helium is known to be insipid. The definition for insipid is without sufficient taste to the pleasing as food or drink, bland. In royal science, this helium disposition has no taste that is pleasing to Yahweh. Neither is this helium person fitted for the kingdoms of the heavens. Matthew 5 and 13. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has become tasteless, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under the foot of man. The rich man is not fitted for the kingdom of heaven because the carnal mind is directed downwards in scale towards the earth. It is the mind. It is the power that runs and controls the bestial man machine of flesh and blood. All his appetites, all passions, all earth-based desires and ambitions. And this mind has a ruler that's in charge. Whosoever lives in this mind or power, the same, this ruler is their father. 1 Corinthians 15 and 50. Now this I say, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of Elohim, neither do corruption inherit incorruption. This is self-explanatory from what was articulated above. The physical element helium from the mundane periodic table has an atomic number 2 and goes by the symbol He. In the perspective of royal science, these are 2 electrons / evil that helium has and does not want to give them up. The 2 electrons are understood as 2 soulish apparatuses, totally crystallized in carnality. the holy place / emotional center, and the most holy place / thinking center, are compromised by the father of lies, being mercilessly driven to the mundane faction of temporal earthly position of glory. The rich man with this helium disposition full of earthly delights and earthly possessions does not want to give up a high, prestigious image for his maker. This type of people is forsaking their own life and power source for the lust of subatomic matter. For much useless toil, he is trapped and hydra-headed. From making the transition from the death of the shallowly world into the light and life of the joyous life. For the devil, who is the father of the dark carnal mind, has blinded this rich man helium disposition and does not allow the man to see the true reality that he presently lives in the heavenly realms of consciousness, but living in the hard, rough whirlwind of the murky, dark nature world, deprived of the eternal conversations from the living, speaking words of the high order, the most beautiful ones of the eternal dynasty. This rich man helium disposition hears the falling, speaking words of terror filled with a murderous, evil, tormenting thought, accompanied with furious, emotional creatures of paranoia. 1 Timothy 6:10. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some covet after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. Then again, Revelation 3:17. Because thou sayest, I am rich and increase with goods, and have no need of nothing, and knowest not that thou art wretched, and miserable, and poor, and blind, and naked. We will do again, Luke 6:24. But woe unto you that are rich, for you have received your consolation. Our royal science has infutable truths all throughout, but we have said enough to tickle your psychical mind. The symbol of helium is He, showing forth the narcissistic disposition of always thinking of self. He, what he wants, what he needs, what he has, what he brought, what he will get. When the physical element helium is inhaled, it produces a high voice, dizziness, dullness, and from contact on the skin in its liquid form, it causes frostbite. In royal science, this disposition is highly contagious and dangerous to another's psychical mind or soul. The spiritual respiration apparatus which breathing is part of is that faculty of mind which perceives words through the mechanism of the ear. Words that are spoken from the rich man helium disposition often have a haughty, deceptive, high, cacophonic sounding intonation of arrogance, mingled with a poisonous, mischievous, and a indecorous palaver, outfitted to earthly pursuits of money-making and token gathering. This causes another in the field of contact with this rich man helium disposition to become spiritually dizzy, having no coherence of righteous perception, causing a person to become dull by the liquescence of the rich man helium disposition. These filthy and non-conducive ponds of words form the wicked wormwood waters that freezes any mind into wickedness. This is spiritual frostbite. Helium was the first gas used for filling balloons and aircrafts. This type of helium application is used in altitude research and was also used in meteorological balloons. From the royal science point of view, this further demonstrates an attempt to raise the characteristics of the helium rich man disposition. For the Satan/electron that's integrated in this type of disposition as the prince of the air uses meteorology to control and harness certain principles associated with the air. Even Harbor, the Star Wars program, Project Blue Beam, and chemtrail sky preparations. This is done to manipulate the atmospheric regions, to bring forth woes from the outside physical world in the attempt to cause spiritual interference in the principal mind of mankind. This characteristic is also informing us that modern science is his forerunner, which is carrying his evil banner. Isaiah 14, 13 and 14. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of Elohim. I will sit enthroned on the mount of the assembly, on the utmost heights of the sacred mountain. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. There are physical elements that are known as reactive elements because these atoms really like to follow what is commonly called the buddy system and form bonds with other atoms. It is said that noble gases don't have this problem. Their outer shells are fixed to the max so that they don't need to bond and react with other atoms. They are very happy and don't need to react with other elements. They rarely combine with other elements. This non-reactivity is why some mainstream scientists call them inert. We will leave this part unamalgamated so the reader can develop an open eye towards the holy ground. By now, it should be self-explanatory what this means. We are hoping that the reader's perception and amalgamative skills elevates into a brilliant conscious awareness. We will now, for the sake of time and for the hope of causing the reader to interact with us in the mind and spirit, in this compendium on the periodic table, we feel that we have said enough to bring a grand realization of the spiritual nature into the psychical mind of the reader. Hopefully soon, we will hear from you, and you will have heard from elevated levels of consciousness and expansion of these ideas towards the redemption and renewal of your mind and body. Most importantly, to lead you towards a loving, merciful relationship with Yahweh, your Creator. Wherefore, you were born into this world under the arbitrated jurisdiction of the reconciliation power. We will now, in the following article, dare to venture into the basics of chemistry, to receive an expansion of modern science to its maximum heights and nobler state, which is royal science, spiritual apprehension. End of reading 6.